At this point, we have all of our second layer of tint done on this chart. And you can see that the paper is just starting to bow a little. So we really need to let this dry pretty thoroughly before we go to the third section. So since you have 3 charts to do, you can actually start another chart as long as you have palettes that you can use to mix the colors for the other charts. You can just go to the next video to see what the next chart is while you're waiting for this to dry. And we'll come back to this. So as you can see, now I have finished painting the third layer of washes, and you can already see the steps as we progress. In this case with the yellow, I have painted 4 and 5 already. Not the 5th layer, but the 4th layer, and you can see how saturated the yellow is already. Once I paint that 5th layer, I won't be able to get any more layers out of that yellow. So that's why I say you can just about do 5 steps with yellow. And I will continue with the rest of these so you'll be able to see how they develop as I keep adding layers. All right, so here's your 4th layer, and as you can see, in some cases you're seeing more distinct steps on some of the colors. Now this red seems very close here, so I think what I'm going to do is put another layer of red down to the 4th layer, even with the permanent rose and even with the ultramarine. Now in the case of the Prussian Blue, I think that this color is a little bit light, so I might add just a touch more Prussian Blue to my mix so I get a darker shade starting to appear as we get up into the darker area of these tints. Because by the time we get to this top row, we need to be at about 100% saturation. So that's what I'm going to do at this point. I'm going to add more color to this one, but I'm going to let this dry before I start to do that. And I'll show you how that works. All right, at this point I'm going to do a second 4-step layer where I will bring the wash down to the 4th square because things are not contrasted enough. Let's see what happens with it, and if I have to, the next round I will add a little bit more pigment to certain colors. I'm going to do another layer of yellow for 4 and 5 because I think I can get another concentration of color once this is dry, and it did need another step in here. It looked like it was just too close. So I'll let this dry, and then I'll go in with a nice bright full saturation yellow. I'm going to do the same thing for the cadmium yellow light. Again, make sure that you load your brush. Don't just dip the brush in with the tippy toes, you know. Fill the belly of the brush with color, and then you can wipe it off, and or gently wipe it off, and get a point on the brush so that you can paint. So I'm doing a double layer of 4. We're going to do another layer of red. Make sure you have a puddle at the bottom end of your wash so that it does not start to get patchy on you. And we'll go down here and let's see what that looks like once we've got a double layer on this shape. Make sure you pick up any extra pigment that is settled at the bottom edge. Now see, that looks much better to me because we have to get all the way up to that red. So this needed a double layer. Now I haven't changed the concentration at all yet. I've just added another layer of color using the same concentration. We're going to do the same thing with permanent rose. Permanent rose looks like it could use a double layer as well. Now this transition here looks pretty good. I'm going to put a double layer of blue on here also, and let's see what happens with it. Same concentration as before, just an additional layer. And you can see that the ultramarine goes down, when you're doing it in thin layers like this, it goes down pretty nicely. All right, now the Prussian Blue, to me, this looks a little too light, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to use the same concentration on this one also. Just doing a double layer here. Down to the third step. That's a much better transition. The violet looks good. The green is passable. Let's see what happens if we just go 5 on that one. Down to the 5th layer. Or down to the 4th. So we're not going to do a double layer of 4 here. We're going to do a single layer of 4 and go to 5. So let's see what that looks like. We may have to go darker. For the sap green. Alright, that doesn't look too bad. And the sepia, I don't think we need to do a double 4 either. Well, if I squint at it, we do. Alright, so I'm going to do a double 4 on the sepia. Yes, good. That looks good. And then I don't believe we need to do a double 4 on the neutral tint. We'll just go to the 5. So we'll go to this point. As soon as you see yourself running out of puddle, make sure you reload your brush so you don't end up with a dry edge. That looks pretty good. So we're going to let this dry, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off the yellow, and then we're going to start to add more pigment to these dark shades so that we can get these steps up to the 100% range. Now we're ready to do step 5, and at this point we probably have to make our pigments a little richer. But you're going to have to test so you don't go too far, because we still have some very, step differences that have to be made before we can get to these final colors. So I suggest that you add a little bit of extra pigment to your supply here and test it. Now with the yellow, I'm going to go really strong, and I may even just go to my library and work off of that, because I want that yellow to be really bright at this point and fully saturated. So this one I'm going to just fill in with a full saturation of color. And you should be able to see a distinct difference here. I'm going to do the same thing with the cadmium yellow. I'm going to work directly from my library of colors and get a nice strong yellow for that top yellow. Remember to always have a puddle. Even if it's a small one, as long as you have a puddle, you're not going to have a problem. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's probably one of the most critical things that you can adapt to do. All right, now for the red. Start with the Scarlet Lake. I've added a little more color to this, made this red a little darker. Just want to make sure that puddle doesn't dry out on me. And it would appear that I could probably go a little darker. I may put a second layer of color on here. Make sure your edges are done. Okay, let's do Permanent Rose. Okay, so we're going to continue this whole process for the next layer of color, adding a little bit more color to your wells and applying it to your tint chart. Okay, so here we are. Neutral tint is quite dark, so I'm just going to go to the next block up, which is the 5th block. And I may put a double layer of color on there because it doesn't seem to be quite dark enough. But you can see all the others I have added color. We are finished with the yellow now, so then we're just going to go back into these other colors. And with the new concentration, I'm going to use the new concentration probably for another 2 steps. And then we're going to have to add more color again in order to get to these final layers. So this is where we are at this point, and I'm going to continue on this as things dry, and we'll show you what this final chart looks like. So here's your tint chart fully finished. You may find as you're doing this that some sections will need more work than others, especially once you put in the last layer of color, which should be just about full saturation. You might find that some things are a little lighter or a little darker, but always go in with a wash of the color that's lighter than the area that you want to adjust so that you don't run into all kinds of headaches. But you should be able to work fairly efficiently if you just wait between layers and let things dry and think before you put things down, and always test on a piece of scrap paper.